The little technique that I'm going to share with you today is a perfect example that shows how we can tweak a most basic thing like an I-cord to create a totally different look. After all, there is no rule that says that we should always knit all stitches when we do an I-cord bind off. Let's see how we can do it with purled stitches. This type of bind off is pretty straightforward. There are just a few steps that we need to follow. When you're ready to bind off stitches, at the beginning of the bind off row, we need to cast on 3 more stitches, and we'll do it by knit on or backwards loop cast on. I prefer to use knit on cast on, so I'm gonna go into the first stitch, wrap the needle with the yarn, pull it through and place it back on the left needle. That's how the knit on cast on works, and then I could do it again and again until I have 3 stitches. The number of stitches determines the thickness of your I-cord, the one that's going to be eventually sitting on top of your stitches. If you want it to be thicker, kind of puffier, then cast on up to 5 stitches. Don't go over 5 because then it's gonna look messy, but up to 5 is acceptable. I prefer to do it on 3 stitches because it's easier, and besides I'm not really looking for thick edge over here. Okay, now we have the setup. We have 3 stitches in front of the rest of the stitches on the left needle, and now we are actually starting to knit I-cord along with binding off stitches. So we're actually gonna purl it, not knit. So for that, we're gonna bring the yarn to the front of the work like we usually do for purling, and then purl 2 stitches one by one. So I purl 1 and then the other one. If your I-cord is thicker than 3 stitches, then purl all stitches up to the last stitch of the I-cord. So in my case, my I-cord is 3 stitches, so I purl 2 and leave the last stitch. And this last stitch is going to be purled together with the first stitch of the fabric. So I'm going to purl 2 stitches together. That's it. We just bound off 1 stitch, right, by purling it together with the last stitch of the I-cord. And that's what we're going to be doing until we bind off all stitches. But to move on, bring the yarn to the back of the work and then slip stitches of the I-cord one by one from the right needle to the left needle like this. And now repeat. Bring the yarn to the front, purl 2 stitches or 3 or 4 depending on how thick is your I-cord, and then purl 2 stitches together. Bring the yarn to the back, slip all stitches, then bring the yarn to the front and do it again and again and again until all your stitches are bound off and you have a nice I-cord sitting on top of your stitches. And I only have 1 stitch left to bind off. See, it's sitting right here, and then I have 3 stitches of the I-cord. So I'm gonna bind off until I have only 3 stitches left. So that's gonna be the stitches of the I-cord. If your I-cord is thicker than 3 stitches, then bind off stitches until you have 4 or 5 or how many stitches you have left. So that's gonna be just the stitches of the I-cord. And that's it. I have arrived at this point, and here's my I-cord. See how cute it is? I'm going to show it to you at the front and the back. The back has those strands a bit, but when you pull the I-cord, then the yarn will redistribute and the strands will be almost gone. Otherwise, it's a cute way to finish off the work. It looks really nice and different. So what do we do with these 3 stitches? That's easy. We cut the yarn leaving a small tail, and then you need a wool needle. Thread this tail into a wool needle and simply slip the stitches one by one from the knitting needle to the wool needle. Put the knitting needle aside and pull the needle through. I like to keep this loop open so I could go into that loop right away and then pull everything up pretty tight. Don't break the yarn though, to finish off the 3 stitches that we have left. And now, while I have it on my wool needle, I will simply hide the tail somewhere inside I-cord. It's a great idea to split the yarn at this point and just go through several stitches to hide the tail, cut the yarn, and we are all done. So that's how it looks on stockinette stitch, pretty cute. And that's how it looks on the seed stitch. So see, it looks nice with many stitch patterns, and it might work for pretty much any project. But the best look is when you finish off the garter stitch. See, it kind of continues the puffiness of the garter stitch, if that makes any sense to you. But I really like the look of it. It looks really consistent with the garter stitch, so that's probably my favorite bind off for the garter stitch. But it looks really nice on other stitch patterns as well. I really like this type of bind off. It creates a textured edge that looks particularly good with garter stitch. And what is your favorite way to bind off stitches? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Thursday.